All right, guys, this one is going to be a little bit different. I'm a little excited to bring it to you. If you've been watching my other videos, you know I have been contemplating switching from the P320 platform to something different, and in my gap pondering sessions, have picked up various different handguns to try and see what is the best fit for me. So what I did is, you only see 5, but essentially I have 6 red dot equipped handguns that I went and shot all at the same time and compared them on, what was it, 5, 6 different categories. We'll see, I got the paperwork. 5 or 6 different categories to see how they stack up against each other. All of them, at the time of shooting, had an X300 on them. All of them had red dots on them. Various degrees of modifications. No, not all the red dots are the same, but I did the best I could to try and keep everything the same as possible. Let's run down the list of the guns. We'll go through how I'm going to evaluate them, and then we'll go gun per gun. So we have a Wilson Combat P320, Smith & Wesson MMP 5-inch, full-size FN 509, a Walther PDP polymer frame 5-inch that's kind of been gussied up for competition. We'll talk about it. And then a CZ P10F, and then not pictured because I had to borrow it. Well, I have to borrow this PDB too, but anyway, not pictured is a Glock 17 with an RMR that was completely stock. So let's get into the evaluation and the categories and what they mean, because they might be a little confusing. So to start out, we're going to go through all the categories I'll be evaluating. Number 1, we have the trigger. Subjective, I'll try and throw poundage in. I think I wrote it down for all of these, but I know it varies. There's snappy triggers, there's rolling triggers. We'll talk about it. It's just my subjective opinion, what I like better. Ergos, again, this is going to be subjective, what fits my hand. For reference, size large hand, I have pretty long fingers. That's going to factor in. Get over it. Recoil, this will be both how snappy it is and how the gun tracks when shooting. This will be the confusing one, quality of life. So if a gun has any weird quirks to it that aren't, that don't make it unreliable, that's going to go into quality of life. If there's no aftermarket for it, that's going to go into quality of life. If you can't find a damn holster for it, that's going to go into quality of life. It's any quirks and just how it is to be with the gun. That's quality of life. And I stole this directly from T-Rex Arms, Lucas, so I doubt you'll watch this, but if you are, sorry. Fast ability. This could be misconstrued into being recoil. However, there are guns that are snappy that return to target very fast, and at that point, the recoil almost doesn't matter if it returns to target faster than your eye can process it, right? There's a little bit of that in there. There's a little bit of, it's just how easy it is to make the gun go fast. We don't have to get all sciencey about it. That's what I'm trying to get at here. So those are the categories. I also have stoppages written down. These have various levels of rounds through them. So, I'll mention them. I'm not going to dock anybody for anything unless it was crazy. I guess for reference, it's like 8,000 rounds. I think like 1,500. This only has like 500. P10 has like 20,000, something like that. And the PDP, I don't even know. He uses it for competition. That thing's probably way out there in terms of numbers, more than I know. So yeah, that is all the segments. Everything is out of 5, except fast ability is worth double for 10, because I agree with Lucas / T-Rex Arms in that is the most important part. I mean, aside from working, but that is the most important part of a firearm. If you're going to use it for any kind of like performance purposes, self-defense purposes, you got to shoot what you're trying to shoot in a good time, reliably. So let's go into it. We'll start with the one not pictured here. So we'll go a little quickly with the first one because it's not pictured, and we're just going to use our imaginations here. Starting off, we have a Gen 5 Glock 17 with a RMR and X300. Completely stock. It just had a lot of rounds through it. Don't know a number, whatever. Trigger, I gave it a 3 out of 5. It's a Gen 5, so I actually think they're pretty decent triggers. They're nothing to write home about. It's not a Gen 3 terrible trigger, but I think they're good. In the middle, 3 out of 5. Next, we have ergos. I might get hate for this. Glock ergos suck. I hate that it makes it feel like you're pointing the gun down to get a decent sight picture. They also feel like you're holding a 2x4. Are they uncomfortable? No. I don't think there's anything beneficial out of them. I know it's supposedly designed that way to mitigate recoil, but I haven't noticed, as we'll find out, I haven't noticed much of a difference in that department between guns with different grip angles, so I gave it a 1.75 out of 5. To recoil, Glocks, they're a little snappy. They track pretty damn well. There's nothing to write home about in terms of recoil. They do track fast, which probably contributes to the snappiness, but like I said, I don't think there's anything to write home about. No one shoots a Glock and goes, wow, that was smooth. So I gave it a 3 out of 5. Quality of life, this should come to no surprise to anybody. I gave it a 4.75 out of 5 because if you can think of it, it exists for a Glock. With the exception that aside from those like Ronin chassis and maybe the B&T back straps with the stocks built in, it's not like a P320 where, you know, it's a chassis gun per se. So like the only thing I can dock it for is not having the versatility a chassis gun has. But if you can think of it, they make it for Glocks. 4.75 is what I gave it. And then fast ability, I gave the Glock 17 a 7 out of 10 in fast ability. In general, I'm not the biggest fan of Glock 17s, but I shoot them pretty well. Like I said, are they a little snappy? Yeah. They track really well under recoil. The recoil cycle is short, so you're back on target really well. They're sprung, you know, I wouldn't say slightly. They're a bit oversprung, but not to the point where it's detrimental to shooting. Again, 7 out of 10. I think most other gun companies want the fast ability of a Glock, and that's why I gave it the score I gave it. Coming up next, we have the FN 509 full size, mods to it, and what's attached to it. So the red dot is a 507 comp, bigger window. Didn't really factor into this test, but it's worth noting. Aftermarket parts. It has every Apex part you could throw at it. Trigger, striker, extractor, not that that's going to matter. And so yeah, that's the FN 509F. Trigger, when I gauged it, it was right at 5 pounds with all the work I had done to it. It's more of a snappy style trigger where you get right up to the wall and then it just blasts right through it. There's grittiness on the front half and a skosh of creep. I mean, it's not the creepiest thing in the world. It's not the cleanest either. I gave the 509F trigger a 3.5 out of 5. Going into ergos, I quite like the FN 509. It has kind of a skinny egg shape, kind of like an oval grip shape. The grip angle is kind of in between the Glock and the 1911. So if you're like a Goldilocks kind of person, it's right in the middle. You'll probably like it. Ambi controls are all placed pretty well, with the slight exception of the mag release you got to kind of reach for. But there was nothing like grossly wrong with it. So I gave it a 4.5, or I'm sorry, a 4 out of 5. 4 out of 5. Recoil. It's very Glock-like. I wasn't really impressed with it. It does return to target pretty well, but it has the normal 509, so the compact slide recoil system. So it has the snappiness of a compact frame with a long slide. Gives it kind of a weird recoil cycle. But like I said, it does return to target quickly, and I'm sure it's oversprung, but it didn't feel like it just based off of the recoil cycle itself. 3.75 out of 5. Going into quality of life, aside from the Apex parts, I think Springer Precision makes a magwell and then mag extensions. And then I think Parker Mount Machine makes some parts that you see a lot of people put on the tactical model. Aside from that, there's not really much of an aftermarket. The way this magwell is shaped was one of the quirks I was talking about. It makes reloads kind of a pain in the ass, to be honest with you. Not my favorite thing in the world. So I gave the quality of life a 2 out of 5. Fast ability for this gun, as I've mentioned, it's balanced pretty good. It's a little on the light side, like overall the gun, but it does return to 0 pretty quick. And I just in general thought it was like pretty, that with the snappy trigger, it was pretty easy to send like consistent strings of fire on target. So I gave it a 7.75 out of 10. I also noted stoppages. So once the optic plate came loose, retorqued it, put a little bit of extra blue Loctite in there. It seems to have fixed it. And then it popped a couple primers. That might have been, I had cheap ammo, so that might have been the ammo's fault or the gun's fault. Not worth really docking the gun any points, but something to note. So do with that information what you will. So next we have the Walther PDP. This is the 5-inch polymer version. The dot is a 507 comp. The trigger is a Walther Performance trigger, and then it has a brass back strap, and I believe it's a ZR Tactical long stroke recoil assembly. There you go. Far from stock, whatever. To start things out, the trigger, if you know much about Walthers, you'll know this shouldn't be a surprise. This easily had the best trigger of the lineup. I docked it a little bit because it was really light. I mean, really light. Now the owner uses this for competition. I'm not gonna judge that. I mean, if it's, you know, do what you want, it's your gun. But when I put it on the gauge, it was 3 pounds, sometimes just under. So to me, that's a little bit too light. I gave it a 4.75, and this is also a what I would consider a snap trigger break. You're on the wall, you're on the wall, it doesn't move. When it snaps, the gun goes off. So this is a very good trigger. Like I said, on the light side, 4.75 out of 5. Going on to the ergos. I might catch some flack on this. Maybe it's just the weird shape of my hands. I had 2 main problems with this, but aside from my problems, I actually think this is the most ergonomic gun on the list. But these shelves for the magazine release ride like the what's it called, middle finger knuckle, and then the support hand, like right up in here, it rubs it raw, and it's uncomfortable if you don't hold it in just the right particular way. And along those lines too, I think it's because these frames are a little fatter than they need to be, but if you put your trigger hand thumb really high, it's like getting hit with a hammer on that thumb knuckle, at least with how my hand shape is. So again, aside from those 2 quibbles, you know, it's one of those things, if you're looking at one of these, you just need to go grab one and try it out. But I gave it a 4 out of 5. Recoil, I also gave it a 4 out of 5. In terms of like muzzle flip, it was weird. It felt flippier than a P320, if that makes sense. Flippier and softer, but when I was paying attention to my dot, the dot actually rose the least on this gun. So I don't know how it has both the, I don't know how it feels flippier, but like when you measure it, it's not. It's kind of weird. And then people talk about these PDPs being snappy, and they are, but once you put these like recoil spring assemblies in them, it definitely takes some of the edge off, so it's not like a standout feature of them, how snappy they are. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I found it pleasurable to shoot, but also not like 2011, you know, feels like you're shooting a 22. Quality of life, I gave this a 4 out of 5. You might have heard all the mods I listed. You can get a lot of stuff for these. These are kind of I would say kind of popular to very popular in the competition world, at least where I'm at. So, and you can get parts for them, MBX followers, I think even MBX mags, all kinds of parts, and whatever you want to do, or not whatever, but majority of the things you want to do to this gun, you can do. In terms of quirks, most of them were just ergonomic quirks. I don't really have too many other ones with this gun, so I gave it a 4 out of 5. I scribbled it out. I think I originally went a little higher, and then I thought about the ergonomic quirks, and I was like, yeah, I should probably dock them a little bit. Fast ability. So, The trigger kind of did a lot of heavy lifting for this gun, because, like I said, for whatever reason, it feels flippy, even though it's not. But the trigger is so good, and you can rip off strings of, I mean, I didn't get a chance to try it, but I imagine my bill drill times with this thing would be insane. Fast ability for this, I gave a 9 out of 10. Again, is it a staccato XC or something like that? No, but you can go pretty damn fast with this thing. So that is that. All right, up next we have a CZ P10F. If you've been on r/gun deals, you've seen these things go for 300 bucks. Let's see how it stacks up. If there's one gun that I would be the most biased towards, it would be this one. When we get to the results, you'll see that it didn't really matter. I have a ton of rounds on this thing. I spent a lot of time with this gun. P10F has Jaegerworks slide work, so it has an RMR, and then some stippling done by, I think it was Light Fighter Tactical Solutions, something like that. It's called the Sprinkles. There's videos on YouTube about the guy that does it. Really good work. The trigger is an HBI Industries trigger, and it has an Overwatch precision striker. So not a ton of work done to this gun, but to be noted, it's been done. So trigger, I gave this a 4.5 out of 5. It has this is kind of a hybrid trigger, to be honest with you. On the gauge, it's 4 pounds, but you go right to the wall. There's a very firm wall, and then it kind of like rolls after that and then goes off. So I don't know whether you would want to call that a snap brake or a roll brake, because it's somewhere in the middle. 4 pounds, like I said, 4.5 out of 5 is what I gave it. Ergos, I really like the ergos of the P10 series. I think there's no hot spots on it. It fits the hand really well. This is a medium back strap. I probably should have done the large before I got it stippled, because it's a little bit small for my hands, but I really, really enjoy the P10 ergonomics. So I gave it a 4.75 out of 5. Recoil. This one surprised me. When I first bought this gun, I could have given you a PowerPoint presentation on how the recoil in this thing is the best one that anyone's ever come out with. In retrospect, and having shooten this side by side everything else, it really has very similar recoil to a Glock, with the only difference being it's got a slightly lower bore axis, so it drives it into your hand more. But it also, when I was trying to track how flippy these guns were, for the low bore axis guns, and I even think maybe compared to all of them, this was the flippiest. And it has, I forgot to mention this, a lighter recoil spring. So it maybe the combination of that plus being low bore axis is more force driving back into your hand. But for whatever reason, the recoil was, it's still good because it's a low bore axis gun, but I wasn't impressed with it. So I only gave it a 3 out of 5. Going on to quality of life, very similar to the PDP. These kind of took the competition world, I don't want to say by storm, but you can find parts for them of every variety. Overwatch makes a trigger, there's competition triggers, there's all kinds of things you can do with these things. And they're so cheap right now, I wouldn't be surprised if more companies don't start making parts and whatnot for them. So I gave it a 4.25 out of 5. Fast ability. Okay, this is where it gets a little bit better for this thing. I gave it an 8 out of 10. And that was for similar reasons to the Glock, but better. Like I said, it being slightly lower bore axis. The return to target's really good. A little bit snappier and flippier than you might imagine. But yeah, when I was doing like 10-10-10s, it would just snap right back to that X-ring or the paster, depending on what I had up there. And I really enjoyed it quite a bit. And then stoppages. This is kind of a, I don't know, I'm kind of letting the cat out of the bag, or however you want to say it. But over the like 20,000 rounds this thing has been through, I've been through like 3 or 4 different strikers. It'll wear down on the I believe it's the drop safety. I'd have to take it apart to check. But that's the main thing, is just trigger wear on these. or not trigger wear, sorry, striker wear on these. Aside from that, it's pretty dang reliable gun. So let's move on to the next one. All right, next one up is a P320. Specifically, this is a Wilson Combat WC P320F with the standard trigger job, mods, and dot. So it's got an acro, has the Gray Guns over travel stop trigger, Gray Guns guide rod with the 15-pound spring. Going into the trigger, I gave it a 4.5. It gauged at 3 pounds. Definitely more of a rolling break. However, it does have a wall, and then it starts to roll and go off. So in terms of rolling triggers, that's kind of how I would prefer it to be. So like I said, 4.5, liked it quite a bit. Ergos, I gave a 4 out of 5. This might be a little bit biased because it's the Wilson grip module, and I find those very ergonomic. It just fits the hand good. There's scallops where there needs to be scallops, undercuts where there needs to be undercuts. It just feels good. Really, I don't know how else to explain it. It just is good in the hand. 4 out of 5. Recoil. So I find P320's recoil really soft. They're just flippy. With the recoil spring guide rod mod that I have, it kind of tames the flippiness, and they're still soft to shoot. So I really like them. Recoil, I gave a 4 out of 5. Like I said, if we could tame some of that flippiness, we would be better off. But in terms of, like, you know, force imparted on you as a shooter, it's very low. Quality of life. And again, I might get some arguments in the comments, and that's fine. You can redo this list however you want. Quality of life, I gave a 5 out of 5. If you want it, it's made for the P320. If you don't want it, it's made for the P320. Anything your little heart, brain, whatever can think of, it's out there, and it exists for the P320, and it scares me. No one can really compete with the aftermarket this thing has. Even Glock, and Glock's been around for forever. So I find that's just crazy. They're easy to work on. There's parts everywhere. They're great in terms of quality of life. 5 out of 5. Fastability. So I gave it an 8.5 out of 10. I probably would have went higher, except, like I said, the flippiness kind of hurts it in terms of trying to drive back on target. The other thing that kind of hurts it in that aspect is the trigger reset is very soft. Not that I'm outrunning this trigger, but you almost feel like you could. Like Glock, the way Glock triggers are, kind of wants you to shoot fast, and this is almost the opposite. That's kind of like an odd way of putting it, but you'll have to bear with me. That's the only way I could think to explain it. It's almost like this gun doesn't want you to go fast, but you could, and that's why I gave it an 8.5 out of 10. Stoppages, issues. My extractor from the factory was a little bit wonky, and I think I put an Apex extractor in there at some point to fix it, and haven't had an issue since. Again, nothing worth knocking it over, but worth noting. There you go. All right, last on the list to compare is the Smith & Wesson MMP 2.0 5-inch. On paper, I should do the worst with this because it's the newest one to me. Starting off with dots and mods. There's no mods whatsoever. Dot is a 508T. I just like them. They're a good go-to dot, and they're not crazy expensive. Trigger. I gauge the factory flat trigger at 4 pounds. It's very much a snap type trigger, so let's just show you. Wall, break. It's pretty straightforward. I like it quite a bit. Gave it a 4 out of 5. Going on to the ergos, I feel like my score on this might sound low because some people find this grip very good and some people don't like it. It's very rounded at the back and square at the front. I find it fits the middle of my fingers very well, and leads to a good positive purchase on the gun. However, it does have kind of that like 2x4 feel you get with Glocks, but only in the front. Aside from that, though, you know, everything's placed very well. Magazine release is in a good spot. Everything else about it is good. So like I said, this might sound kind of low, but 3.75 out of 5 is what I gave it. Recoil, this is one that surprised me because it hasn't been touched at all. No aftermarket spring, no nothing. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5, mostly because it tracks so well under recoil. It returns right back to target, like very quickly and smoothly. It has all the benefits of being low bore axis, but it shoots very soft. It's very impressive what Smith & Wesson was able to do with this handgun. And yeah, that's why I gave the recoil score such a high score. It's the best of both worlds, in my opinion, when it comes to recoil. Quality of life, these are relatively popular, but they don't have quite the catalog that, say, a P10 or a PDP has. But it is good. You have companies like Ed Brown doing some cool things with these, and you know, various other things going on with MMPs. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I feel like that's pretty fair. And then the final score to give it is fastability. So how I said the PDP's score on fastability was the trigger kind of holding or carrying most of the weight. For this gun, it's whatever the recoil system is carrying most of the weight. I gave it a 9 out of 10. And that is just because it returned to target so well while being soft and tracking so well under recoil. Again, very impressive. The trigger made me want to go fast, and when I did go fast, I was shooting tight groups. Everything seemed to gel really well with this handgun. Again, very impressed with this. All right, now let's get to the final results and turn to the Blicky breakdown board to see who is number one. Well, there you go. That's the Blicky breakdown board. As you can see, the PDP ended up winning, and I think it makes sense. A gun like that, tuned up for a competition, probably will pull ahead in most situations. For me, though, just due to my the ergonomic quirks and how it affected me as a shooter, the PDP is not the gun for me. So what ended up happening, if you look at the board, is these are the two I'll be having to suss out, is the MMP 2.0 and the P320. And this whole journey was about replacing the P320. So if anything, probably going to go with the MMP 2.0. But if you like this form factor, let me know in the comments. I thought it was pretty fun to do, and it would be a cool thing to tack on to the end of any other gun video, well, specifically pistols, but tack on to the end of any gun video of mine to add to the Blicky breakdown board, almost like the you know, the Top Gear race laps or whatever. But yeah, that's the results. It was fun, and hopefully you guys liked it. If you did, let me know.